the Jeff Buller Show. Today I have with me Mike and Gaby Grinberg. Now, Mike and Gaby are in the Twin Cities, right in the centre of the USA, and I'm based in Sydney, though you can't tell because I'm inside a room. But welcome to the show, Mike and Gaby. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much,
having us.
Jeff.
Now, Mike and Gaby have a business that they run remotely, and we're going to talk a fair bit about that, and it's called Proofpoint Marketing. They've had some challenges along the way, both working remote and also raising a family. So we're going to have a little chat about balancing work-life balance. We're also going to talk about the challenges of working remotely, both which a lot of us do these days, but also a lot of us have a hybrid combination. So just a little bit about Mike and Gaby. They're a dynamic business duo. They work together, and they're still together, which is really fabulous, guys. Well done.
Thank you.
They started Proofpoint Marketing 3 years ago, and they built it on a completely remote model with a customer-first focus, a little bit like Amazon by the sounds of that. They describe themselves as a couple of hustlers with agency, corporate, and startup experience, and I think they've been in marketing ever since they could spell, I think, really. So, and obviously, some of it could spell at an early age and others, but it's okay. So we're going to have a little chat about a few things, but Mike and Gaby, thank you very much for agreeing to be on the show. And what we're going to do now is so what inspired you to firstly to get into marketing? So, and you're both going to have different stories because you haven't been together since birth, obviously, because you're now a married couple. So, what got you into, maybe Gaby first? I haven't done a 3-person Zoom call on the interview yet, but here we go.
It's the first time for everything.
So anyway, so Gaby, tell us ladies first. Gaby, how did you get into it?
Thank you so much. Yeah. I think I've always been attracted to marketing, even as a young child, not really knowing what it was, marketing and sales and this idea of branding. I from a young age, I was always attracted to company logos and colors and design, and and I had sort of this photographic memory for the shapes of logos and what the colors were and the taglines and things like that. So it was just maybe something that I kind of naturally gravitated toward. In college, I went to Boston University and I majored in public relations, which is kind of a cousin to marketing.
Yep.
Marketing, advertising, public relations, we're all kind of cousins in that regard. And so I majored in PR, I minored in IR, international relations. And I was actually leaning more towards a job in the foreign service. I wanted to be an attaché at an embassy. I didn't have aspirations to become the ambassador per se, but I wanted to be part of the foreign service. I was very interested in international relations. I speak several languages.
Oh, wow.
My parents are both immigrants and come from other countries. I'm first generation American. So the idea of serving my country and being able to work internationally was very attractive to me. But I had a professor in college who told me, Gaby, you're a smart girl. You perform so well in my class. I love your contributions in my class, but I just, I look at you and I see you performing and doing other things. Not that you couldn't do this, not that I'm trying to discourage you, but what's your major? And I said, my major's in PR. He said, I think that's where your strengths are. I think you should focus on communication and marketing and PR. And, of course, if you want to pursue IR, I'll support you, but I really think you should consider that career for yourself. And I asked him, I was actually really hurt and dejected by the answer, but I asked him, I said, why, why, professor? And he said, look, international relations is a tough gig, and it's a man's world out there. And as someone as bright and vibrant as you're going to get trampled on, you're going to get, squashed on. And if you have any intentions of starting a family and having a husband, it's going to be really hard for you to do that in this type of work. And for me, I knew that getting married and having a family was always going to be part of my plan. So that really solidified that career trajectory for me, in the sense of, okay, you know what, I'll focus on the communication. I'll focus on the marketing and advertising. And so I went into that path, and I haven't looked back since. I started off at an ad agent, traditional ad agency in
Okay.
Boston. And it was right around the time that, Facebook was being born and coming onto the scene, and all these other social media networks. LinkedIn was pretty nascent. Twitter was growing up, and I know I'm very much dating myself right now.
It's all right.
But I just I got involved in that digital space, and I haven't looked back. And per your introduction, I've worked an agency side. I've worked in-house for large corporations here in the Twin Cities, and I've also done some startup work. So that's kind of my path to marketing. And then we can talk later on in the show about how we actually started Proofpoint, which is a story on its own.
Okay. Well, PR is often a way into marketing, is it, for many, many people? It's about communications, and what's marketing and advertising about? It's about communicating, isn't it, really? A message.
Absolutely.
And getting people to sign up. In other words, be convincing and credible. So, Mike, over to you. How'd you end up in marketing? Interested in
my marketing journey is probably a little shorter than that, than Gabby's, in the sense that I also originally was not looking into marketing. I was looking more on the creative side of things, like graphic design and whatnot. And at one point, my parents said, "Well, we're going to pay for college, but we don't think this whole doing pictures on the internet thing is all that. So you should probably go do something with business." I'm like, "All right, well, I guess marketing is as close as I can get to that. So marketing it is." So I double majored in marketing and graphic design, thinking I was still going to go the graphic design path. And I very quickly, through internships, found that, I actually don't want to be in design. It's too subjective and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up going into digital marketing, doing some more internships, and like Gaby said, never looked back.
Right. So you guys met. How long ago you guys been together? So
we met 10 years ago now. We've been married for 8 almost.
Okay. So
we met online, which is not ironic. We help companies find their clients online, their ideal clients, and we, as a husband and wife team, we met online too, which is kind of funny.
These days most people meet online. It's not even, like, it's weird if you meet somebody at a bar,
right?
How did you met this person in person?
Well, you just meeting someone at a bar, it's like, okay, this is a bit strange. Do I actually have to talk to them?
Yeah.
And in this very complicated world of that we live in today, it's flirting's become a dangerous thing to do. Frankly, it's so yeah. I've met online is great. I think what's good about online is it provides a little bit of a gentle checklist. Because quite often people say, "This is what I'm looking for," or "This is what I have a degree," or and you know what? You can't ask those questions at a bar going, "Okay, I'm going to ask you 10 questions. Can you answer them all truthfully?" Not that online's necessarily any less truthful or more truthful, but so yeah, online, fantastic way to meet people, frankly, and I think. I think social media and digital world is certainly changing what we are as humans, and that's really fascinating as well. So we won't go down that rabbit hole just yet. But so you guys met, you're both interested in marketing, and you decided to start a business together called Proof Marketing. Where did that inspiration come from?
Yeah. Well, so I'll backtrack a little bit. When we first met, it was interesting because we were both working for marketing agencies in downtown Minneapolis. And unbeknownst to us at the time, my company that I was working for had subcontracted the company that Mike was working for on a project that I was managing for one of my clients. So when we went on our first date, we said, "Oh, where do you work? Where do you work? What do you? Oh, that name is so familiar." And then we started putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and we realized that we were connected in that regard, that, you know, I was the project manager and his company had been subcontracted, and actually he was on that account and working on the account. So it was a pretty serendipitous moment that we discovered. But we certainly did not start our relationship, our romantic relationship, with ever the thought of working together. In fact, we were both adamant.
It's the opposite.
Right. We were both adamant, Mike more so than me, that we would never work together. And at the time, Mike was working for a company here in the Twin Cities that has a tremendous reputation, a wonderful agency, very well known here in the Twin Cities, and I'd probably argue well known throughout the upper Midwest. And he had carved out a really strong position for himself there, and he was a bit of a darling at the company. And I would be invited to company functions, I'd be invited to their events and so on and so forth. And anytime I wanted to to really give Mike a little bit of a zinger, I'd tell him that I was going to apply to his company, that I was going to get a job there. And that would really put him in his place, because then he would say, nope, I don't want you to work with me, don't want to have that. You know, we have to have separation of, you know, church and state, separation of romance and work. But, you know, as anything in life happens, you make plans, and then those plans get tossed out the window when other things come your way. And so, you know, at this point in time, so this is 2015, Mike was working for actually that same company at the time. Different company. Mike was working for a different company at the time, and I was working for a startup. And I was we found out that we were pregnant. We were just, you know, shy of a few weeks along. And I had told my boss, hey, you know, I'm pregnant. He said, yeah, no problem, no worries. Congratulations, all good. Well, fast forward to 24 weeks of our pregnancy. So that would have been 5 months. Mm-hmm. And I experienced severe preeclampsia, and our daughter was born severely premature. She was born 4 months early, weighing less than a pound. So wow. For those using the metric system, she was 330 grams at birth, 11 ounces. And to make a very long story short, that was a very unexpected plan in our trajectory together. At the same time, I actually lost my job. So that the same company that said, yeah, no worries, you're pregnant, congratulations. When push comes to shove, when I was in the hospital for a week and our daughter was born prematurely, I'd lost my job shortly thereafter. So here we find ourselves, a young married couple, first child born severely premature, in severe medical distress. And I've lost my job now, and I've lost our health insurance because I was the primary healthcare holder. And we went through a very long hospitalization. Our daughter was in the hospital for 6 months. When she came home, she had some medical needs, and she required a full-time caregiver. So since I wasn't working, I became a full-time caregiver to her, and you know, being a stay-at-home mom and caring for her, and she had a lot of medical needs and a lot of doctor's appointments and early intervention at the time. So it was a pretty intense few years with her as an infant. Around the time that she was just shy of her second birthday, so she was born in 2015, came home in 2016. By 2017, she was going to be turning 2. And I had reached a point where I was ready to go back to work. I wanted to have a job. I wanted to get back into my career. And she was at a point where we were comfortable leaving her with a nanny or, you know, some sort of a caregiver. We were looking into those options. And as we were making those plans, the company that Mike was working for, a different company now, went bankrupt. It was a startup that he was working for in the Twin Cities. They had lost their funding. It was all over the Minneapolis news. And voila, we found ourselves at another major crossroads. Mm-hmm. Mike, who's now the sole provider for our family, is now without a job. And we kind of looked at ourselves. We had a very difficult decision to make. We said, okay, I want to go back to work. Mike needs to find another job because he's now out of a job. And we have this child who's doing really well, thriving, but still needing a high degree of care and attention from her parents and from doctors and so on and so forth. What do we do? The options were, well, let's go out and get a corporate job. That's safe, it's secure. We'll have jobs, we'll have job security. Of course, we all know that that's not really the case. Or we could do something crazy. And so a bit of the story that I failed to mention is that while our daughter was, shortly after our daughter was born, Mike had started taking on some consulting work. So he was working full time. We were in the hospital spending as much time as we could with our daughter. And then he had a number of consulting clients that he was taking on the side. And he had started growing those accounts over the last 2 years.
So Mike was starting a side hustle.
It was very much a side hustle, and it became our full-time hustle because we looked at each other and we said, okay, do we really want to go the corporate route? And neither of us were really very enthusiastic about that. And then the crazy, less stable, more radical idea was, let's take these clients that he had, these small accounts, and let's turn them into something. And so that's really how Proofpoint Marketing was born. It was certainly inspired by our daughter and her prematurity, but then a lot of little blips and bumps and valleys and hills along that path of me losing my job, losing our income, losing our health insurance, Mike losing his job, and all of these circumstances happened without us being able to have any control. I lost my job through no fault of my own, simply because I had a medical emergency and my employer was not willing to keep me on the payroll. And Mike lost his job because of poor management decisions that caused the company to go into bankruptcy. So we decided that we were tired of having other people dictate our careers and dictate our family life and dictate how we were going to survive as a family. And so we decided, we look back and sometimes we think we're crazy, but today we know that we're exactly on the path where we needed to be, because we're now in a position to be in control, fully in control of our destiny, of our income, of our family life, and of the kind of culture and company that we can create. That's very important to us. So that's the story.
Yeah, this is fascinating to hear that. There's 2 points I want to make from what I've heard. Is that number one, having control of your own destiny and starting a side hustle, Mike, like you did, while you were fully employed. I suppose on reflection, that was a really smart thing to do. In fact, the numbers on side hustle in America, I believe that 42% of all American workers have a side hustle of some type. And that might be a consulting gig on the side. It might mean selling stuff at the market. It really doesn't matter what sort of side hustle it is, but it's over 40%. And the other thing you discovered too, which, and we've all experienced over the years, is that you may love the company, but the company doesn't necessarily love you back.
Right.
And
Yep.
That's the reality. And most of us go, I love this company, I want to work for them. And guess what? When push comes to shove, the bottom line wins most of the time. And the other thing that, from observing and listening to what your story, Gaby and Mike, is that I think pain is underrated and pleasure is overrated, in the sense that quite often the best opportunities come out of pain and trouble.
Yes. And
you said, well, let's go and get a safe corporate job. Well, okay, safe corporate job is maybe a oxymoron, frankly. So the reality is that I think we've got to look at challenges in our lives as an opportunity to actually reinvent yourself. And it's happened for me over the years. I reflect on it and I think, where do the best opportunities come from? When I was when things were going smoothly or when things were going badly.
Right.
And you've got to be careful what you wish for. I want to hang on to this, and quite often. So it's really interesting to hear your story, guys, that reflects, and this is what people are going through. How do I start a new business? And, the old adage used to be, burn the boats, leave the business, and we're going to leap in and start a business now. Whereas there's so many ways to do it now. We've got the tools and technology to do a side hustle that becomes the main hustle, just like you guys have done. So, next question. So maybe Mike could answer this, and Gabby's had the floor for a little bit.
We're used to that.
I was watching you nodding, Mike. It's fine. So you started the business. What were some of the challenges along the way?
Challenge. I mean, there's been lots, I guess.
Top 2, top 3, doesn't matter.
I mean, the very first one is, okay, well, how do we get more clients, right? It's one thing to have a side hustle where it's not like, I mean, it was necessary because, it was sort of making up for lost income while Gabby wasn't working, but it wasn't like we could have survived without it if we had to, right? So, I think I had maybe 3 client engagements at the time. They weren't very big. We're talking, I don't know, what it was, a total of probably, I don't know, 3,000 to 5,000 a month or something like that in total, something like that. So not like life changing, like, okay, we can survive on this long term kind of thing. And it was, okay, how do we get more clients? Like, what do we do? Who do we work with? How do we get our name out there? So that was the big one. It was in which we learned a lot, which is it's better to niche down sooner than later.
Yes.
We made that whole mistake of we'll work with anybody. And we worked with a lot of people we should never have worked with.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but there were a few.
So you fired a few clients in the end.
We did.
We
yes,
did.
We did fire. We actually, at one point, we fired our largest client by far. Like we were excited. We got them. They were our largest client. And about, I don't know, what was it, like 3 to 6 months into it, we were like, this is awful.
It was not a good fit. Yeah.
So yeah, that was one challenge. Figuring out when and how to scale was another one, in terms of, do we start with contractors? Do we do full-time people? Do we do VAs? And we tried, honestly, just about everything across the board. We've settled on a hybrid of full-time and contractors, depending on the roles and whatnot, but it took us a little while to get there, and we're still figuring out the exact structure as we go here. I'm trying to think, what was another one?
Managing cash flow, is that's often a challenge for businesses?
I mean, I don't know if it was a challenge. It was more of yes, there were cash flow challenges. Yes, I think we dealt with them and worked through it and whatnot. I don't know. I don't know that it wasn't the major one. I think the big one for us was probably really figuring out how to, because we always knew we wanted to build a remote company.
Yep.
But when we made that decision, we didn't really think through exactly what that meant. Mm-hmm. So we're like, yep, we're going to be remote. It totally makes sense. Why would we want an office? This is great. Right. And when we started hiring people, it became very apparent very quickly. Okay, well, we actually need to build a remote culture, which is not the same as an in-office culture. And you can't just take whatever works in office and put it over here in the, put the square peg in a round hole and make it work. So that's probably been the big thing that we've figured out over the last, I don't know, Gabby, what, year and a half, 2 years?
I would say, I would echo Mike's thing that, yes, getting new business sales is always a difficult challenge, especially when you have 2 marketers, so you've got 2 lifelong, born and bred marketers. Now you're telling us we have to go and get clients, and now we have to figure out our sales. What's a sales playbook? What's we did, that was a huge challenge for us. And actually, I would say that not only was it a challenge for us when we first started the company, which was back in 2017, so a little almost 4 years ago now, it became even more apparent, Jeff, during 2020, during the pandemic, that was our biggest problem. That was our biggest gap as a company. Was we didn't have a problem when it came to marketing. We didn't have a problem when it came to delivering the work. We didn't have a problem when it came to even attracting employees, but we had a problem getting clients, getting our foot in the door. There are, probably 500,000 marketing agencies in the United States. Maybe that's a conservative number. There's a lot of options out there when you think about marketing agencies. You can, and from big to small and everything in between. So we had a sales problem, and that became so imminently apparent during the pandemic. And I think the biggest win that we had as entrepreneurs is that we were able to recognize that problem. Probably took us a little bit longer than most, but during the pandemic, that's what stood out the most to us. And then we were able to very quickly find a solution to that. And we hired a sales coach who we actually met on our podcast, and he impressed us, and we had a great connection with him. And since then, since last year, since 2020, we can confidently say that we no longer have a sales problem. We've actually hired our first sales rep. And so that's been, I think that was our biggest challenge from the beginning, but we didn't realize it as such. And it became a bigger problem for us during the pandemic. So during a time where, the proverbial shit hits the fan. I hope I can use that language on the podcast.
Fine with me.
Right. That's when we realized, okay, wow, this is our biggest problem. And I think that a lot of marketing agencies, especially if you come from a traditional marketing side, you're going to find that you may have an understanding of sales, you may have an appreciation of sales, you may even know how to do a little bit of it, but it's very rare to find a marketer and even, a business owner that can go from prospecting to the full cycle and closing the deals. We found that we were really good at closing the deal once we had the client, but we were really lousy at some of the prospecting and some of those initial
lead generation.
You could say lead generation, but building the pipeline, the initial prospecting, and then kind of the qualifying of the clients.
Our first meeting was pretty awful when you look back at what it was.
The first touch point was always pretty, but then if we were lucky to get that second meeting, then we usually kind of found our path and got on course. But we needed help in sales, and so that's been one of the biggest challenges that the pandemic brought to life for us as a business.
Cool. Now, Mike, you mentioned the word niche, or in America they say niche. So it's same word, frankly. What did you target? In other words, what was your niche?
Well, like I said, initially there wasn't one. We have multiple evolutions. We went from kind of doing everything to being just B2B. Then next step was, okay, well, we're not just B2B everything. We are B2B for these specific industries, which is, we focus on med tech and manufacturing companies mostly.
Okay.
And there is possibly going to be a future iteration that brings us even narrower, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
So.
Has that been important in terms of helping your sales as well?
Yes, it makes things a lot more repeatable, right? Yes. Not in the sense that you're doing an out of the box thing for everybody, but it makes your presentations similar. It makes the language you use similar. It makes your prospects have the similar problems. They speak a similar language.
Yep.
Your case studies resonate more. Everything just fits a lot better.
Okay. Yeah, it's fascinating because we want to sell to everyone because everyone needs marketing, and that's a big mistake instead of niching down. So let's move on to some of the other challenges, especially happened in the last 12 months, is remote work. So remote businesses, there's a lot of businesses that are, like GitHub's one of the great examples, along with a bunch of others now, dozens, hundreds of people now, hundreds of businesses are actually basically, we're going to run a totally remote business model. So And I'd be interested too on what sort of tools you use to actually facilitate remote work, because the tools that emerged in the last 5 to 10 years for, Zoom's a perfect indication we're doing that right here, right now. Collaboration tool. So, number one question is, what are the 2 or 3 big challenges you found with remote work in terms of culture, productivity, and then what are some of the tools you're using as a second question?
Yeah.
So I'll preface, this is one of my favorite topics. So
Okay.
I'll preface this with I don't want to say technology doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter. Like I think that's the problem we've seen across organizations, forget businesses, but when what most organizations did that weren't ready, that were not already remote and had kind of figured some of this stuff out, they said, okay, well, we're just going to do exactly what we do in the office and we're going to do it remotely. And that doesn't work. We saw it fail in education. We saw it fail in the organizations kind of across the board. It just doesn't work. You can't do the same things, right? There's, and I think the in-office model, the hybrid model, and the remote model are all very viable models still today. They just have different pros and cons, and you have to lean into the positives of each rather than try to figure out how to take this thing from here and make it work over here. So like with remote, the value of remote is asynchronous communication. So you have to really lean into that and figure out how do you build your culture and your process and everything to really focus on asynchronous. And we have not figured all this out yet by any means, but we're definitely further ahead than the average company at this point. But I think that's probably the biggest thing. So it's how do you build, like I said, processes and culture that is able to work asynchronously. Doesn't mean we don't get out, we still have, we have our team meetings, we have meetings with clients, virtually, things like that. But it's figuring out how to, so as far as tools you asked, our tool stack is fairly straightforward. We have a project management tool. We use ClickUp. We have Slack for communication. Within Slack, we have an app that lets us do like asynchronous stand-up meetings. So rather than everybody getting on a call together every morning and saying, what's everybody working on? Everybody just submits their thing every day. And then at the end of the day, it's sort of an accountability. It's all about accountability. It's not like keeping track of people, but it's saying, okay, well, did you get done what you said you're going to get done? If not, why? And let's figure it out.
Yep.
So like those types of things. And then, for like, I guess that's it for as far as remote workforce. We use Gusto for, like payroll and things like that, but you can use that for office stuff.
We use Google for Business. So, our email is powered by Google and we use Google Docs.
Yes.
And Google Drive for sharing and storage and things. So that's kind of like our hub for storage of documents and agency repository. One other thing that I will add to Mike's feedback here is one of the biggest things that we undertook almost right away when we started Proofpoint was something called a culture book. And this is very different than a traditional employee handbook. The culture book is really a way for us to codify what it means to be working at Proofpoint, what it means to be a proof pointer. What are our cultures? What are our values? What do they mean? How do you implement them? How do you show your teammates your culture, or show through your actions how you're driving the culture forward. So that I think that's very eminently important. If you think about every culture, every society, from time immemorial, what have they done to keep their society moving forward, progressing? It's the codification of their cultures, the codification of their rules. The biggest example of this, of course, is Moses and and the 10 commandments. That's the biggest codification of culture and rules out there that exists. And so we, short of that, we have the Proofpoint culture book, and that is something that is a living, breathing document. It has gone through many iterations. Even just in the past 4 years, we continuously update it and review it and study it and say, okay, is this really still valid? Is this value, does this pertain? We've learned a lot just in the past 4 years of growing the company, scaling, bringing on different clients, bringing on different employees, onboarding employees, offboarding employees. And so all of the things that we've learned and all the things that we want to espouse in our company and the things that we want our team to also absorb and follow goes in that book. And it's something that we review on day one with our team during our onboardings. And it's something that we're also trying to find ways that throughout the year, we can continue to revisit the culture book, continue to add to it and kind of bring it into our dialogue. So I would say that any company out there that's, whether they're remote or they're have an office or they're doing some sort of hybrid model, whatever the organization structure is, I would highly recommend putting together a culture book. That can be an exercise that the entire company, not just senior leadership, but all members of the organization can take part in and can really embrace. So that was something that we've done that has really served us well.
So where did you get the inspirational template for that culture book?
Good question. There are, I'd love to say that it was my idea and it wasn't. There are some wonderful companies, mostly coming out of Silicon Valley. Netflix has a wonderful culture book that we referenced. What's that?
We also looked at some agency, like big agencies, I think too,
some agencies,
and we tweaked everything they had.
HubSpot
Okay.
has a really good one.
Yeah.
GitHub, you mentioned GitHub. They have a very extensive employee culture book. And what I like about theirs is actually it's part culture book, part employee manual. And that's actually something that I'm currently undertaking this year, is to take our culture book and marry it with what would be more of a traditional employee handbook. So we're currently working on that. Another thing that we're doing that I think is imperative for remote companies is to document your process and your procedures. Document your standard operating procedures for each area of your business. So for example, we have what you might consider, 4 distinct pillars of the company. We have our strategy, performance content, performance media, and then there's the analytics side. So for each of those pillars of our company, we're in the process of creating the SOPs, sort of the guidebook. Yep. We also have client success. So that's our project manager and our account management team. We, myself, I'm head of client success, and my subordinate, Kristen, we are currently in the process of building out that manual for the client success team. And that should be ready hopefully in the next couple of months. So I think that's very important as well, especially because if you think about a traditional employment model where you have 4 walls, you have some desks, and you've got some, what are those called? Dividers. What are they called, Mike? Cubicles. Thank you. People learn via osmosis because you hear what your colleagues are saying, you hear what this certain person said here, and you go to meetings and so on and so forth. But in a remote environment, there's no cubicles, there's no 4 walls other than the 4 walls that you are personally surrounded by. And certainly our employees learn things and we pick up things on Slack, but we needed to have a place where things were codified and documented so that there was no question. There was never a concern of, well, that was never told to me, or I never knew that, or nobody taught me that. We want to take the guesswork out of creating that culture and out of creating those boundaries and those guidelines. So that is another tool that I would also very highly recommend to any entrepreneur or business out there that's considering a hybrid model or considering full-time remote. Think about what are the things that you need your employees to know, things that you don't want to have to repeat, and things that you want them to know without having to think twice about it. And put those down in a guidebook, write them down, make sure that they're visible to everyone in the company. And then revisit them because they're going to need to be updated.
I think you've made a great point, and in talking to many entrepreneurs over the last 12 months, I've heard very much the same stories about documenting your procedures and process, because that leads you to and allows you to scale more easily, because you don't have to be repeating yourself, and you don't have to be customizing as you go on the fly. So yeah, and what I do love is I do love the idea of the culture book. I haven't heard that before, but I'm sure people maybe give it a different name. And GitHub is one of the, I suppose, the shining lights in terms of documenting processes and standard operating procedures and putting them into a document. I think they're up to 8,000 or 9,000 pages, and it's a public document. It's not hidden. So that's pretty amazing. So now, another question I'm going to ask is, you are a success manager, is that right, Gaby? Is that right? Client success. Okay.
Yes, VP of Client Success, yes.
Okay, so this is the other thing that's important too, isn't it? Like, what are your roles? So Mike, what's your roles?
Yeah, so we finally figured out this over the last little over a year of, okay, we're going to really pick our lanes and
Yep.
not step on each other's toes. So I run agency operations. So I'm the CEO. I run agency ops, finances, all that fun stuff. And I also head up strategy, so client strategy. And then Gaby on the flip side does all our internal, so like our agency marketing, client success, and she also heads up HR, so employee success as well.
Okay.
That's how we split.
Okay, so and the challenge quite often is the balance between detail and strategy, isn't it? So who's the more detailed of you?
That would be me.
That'd be Gaby.
I thought that might be the case.
I'm the guy that runs in her office, goes, "Hey, I got this idea. What do you think?" And she looks at me going, "Why don't we just go and execute the other 500 things that you've already thought of?"
What she's really saying to you is piss off. We've got more ideas than we need.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the more accurate way to put it.
I know. My staff say to me, I turn up at run a weekly meeting and talking to marketing managers. I've got this idea, and you're going, Jeff, look. So I've really learned to just double down. I think I have there's two sides. We're launching a new product service this year, which is a major project. One project a year is fine. The rest is optimization strategies for the rest of the business. So there's really two things to do. So my staff have to remind me occasionally, Jeff, we don't need another idea.
Yeah.
So,
we have a channel, we have a Slack channel that's called Parking Lot. And that's where anybody that has an idea, or if we come across something or a screenshot or whatever it is, we put it in the parking lot. And when we have a little bit of bandwidth and we have a little bit of, we've just sort of, let's say we've crossed a finish line on something, then we can say, okay, let's go to our parking lot. What can we take out of the parking lot? So I'm constantly reminding Mike, can you put that in the parking lot, please?
And you're going to choose which car you want to drive today.
Yeah.
Is it the Ferrari or is it just the Model T Ford? Okay, so it sounds like you guys are really getting things organized and getting your processes done. And so let's chat a little bit about the future, I suppose, where you see digital marketing going and social media. Where's that going? I'd be interested in your thoughts on those areas. So anyone can answer that. I'm cool with that.
I'll let this is where Mike really shines. So I'll let him take the center stage.
Now there's all this pressure. No, I'm kidding.
Just your observation.
I mean, this year has been really we'll call it the force multiplier for changes that have been happening for a while, right? So you look at how people consume information and how they research. And we're mostly in the B2B space, so I guess that's our focus. And I think all these trends are going to continue to scale and kind of go from there. So in terms of, social is becoming more and more and more important. I mean, I shouldn't say more important. You can argue that it's the number one channel rather than search. And at this point, like if you look at how people research products and services on the B2B space, it's usually, what are you going to do? You're going to go into your micro communities and you're going to ask somebody like, hey, what do you guys use for XYZ? Right. Or you're going to go on LinkedIn and you're going to make a post and say, hey, community, what do people do for such and such problem? Or you're going to, reach out to people, things like that. Right. It's very much that before you're going to go and learn about something. And then maybe you'll go search for it. Right. Or search for the thing. So search is still important. It's still a distribution channel, but whereas, if we were talking in say 2010, 2015, search is still probably the number one channel you have to worry about. I don't think that's the case anymore. And that's coming from somebody who grew up in the search space. Like that's what I did, paid search, SEO. That's where I started.
Right.
I think the proliferation of automation and AI, I think, is going to continue. We're definitely not at the point where, we got to be worried about robots taking over our jobs kind of things. I think, we've done a number of tests with, all the GPT-3, content tools and whatnot, and they help, right? From maybe organizing ideas or finding new ideas to talk about or something like that, but they're not really good at the writing part just yet. They can't create new concepts. They can't create a POV or anything like that. So I think we're a little ways away from something like that happening. But I think like the big trends, I would say, on the B2B side are more social, more kind of disparate channels, if you will, in terms of how people find information. And that kind of traditional lead gen model is just going to go away pretty quickly, I think. There's still a lot of companies, I think, they're holding on to that. And, the traditional, like, gated content, email nurture, sequence, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's pretty much gone already. I think it's going to be gone within the next year completely.
So where do you see then, in terms of that gated content generating leads, how do you see lead gen for B2B then if it's moving away from that? How do you see that? Is how people, number one's discoverability. Okay, in other words, because we're in the middle of a battle of the algorithms, which has been getting tougher and tougher over the years, in that Facebook's algorithms, Twitter's algorithms, Google's algorithms. We even now have algorithms that are imposed on email, what you see and appears in the different columns. So where do you see B2B marketing lead gen instead of the traditional sort of, gated content? Where do you see that?
Yeah.
I'd be interested.
And I should preface this, I guess, with there's still room for it for more transactional businesses, right? So if you're selling a $50 a month thing to like an individual, more of the transactional stuff is still works, and it still probably can work for a while longer. It's more of this when you're selling them, not even just enterprise, but just more like larger deals where it's anything that's getting driven into a sales team or something like that. That's where it's gone. I think the reality is just that everybody knows what's coming, right? Nobody trusts that information anyway. It's like, okay, great. I'm going to download this ebook and I'm going to get blasted with phone calls and emails and I'm not even ready to buy. I think really where it's heading to is, we already know, like, the Gartners of the world are putting out that, most of the research is happening before anybody talks to sales. So I think it's really whatever we as marketers can do to get information consumed to create that, to create the intent, so that so people are coming more inbound and saying, hey, can I talk to somebody? And I actually, like, versus making the assumption that, okay, well, you downloaded an ebook and a white paper and you opened up a couple emails, so I guess it's time to kick you over to sales and have them bombard you with stuff. When that's just not usually how we buy. So I think it's just more around open education and content consumption. And maybe you can even argue entertainment on the B2B side, just getting people, engaged with the brand rather than the traditional lead gen model that's focused on contact acquisition.
Do you see podcasts as an important part of that? Because I know you guys launched one recently. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, because this is one of the things that I hadn't realised up to about 18 months ago, is the power of podcasts to actually generate leads and trust and credibility. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
100%. Yeah, I think it's something we're obviously doing it. This is the one we just launched is our second podcast. So yes, it's got a lot of power to create connections, even whether it's for business directly or indirectly, right? We've had people recommend us that have been on our show. We've made connections with people that could become business opportunities afterwards. But more so than that, even, I think this is where I would argue some people are going about it the wrong way. Like, if you're only starting your podcast strictly to talk to people so you can turn them into a deal, you're kind of sabotaging that channel for yourself over time. I think it's the content is what it needs to be for, and you have to create that. It needs to stand on its own. If you make, and you can you can have business conversations out of that come up because you're making that connection and it's genuine. But it's the content that comes out of it that you can then use for distribution across social, et cetera.
Yeah,
I think
that's the value.
I think authenticity is the name of the game. And if you ask me, it's the name of every game that I want to play. If you're not authentic, if you're very subversive, if people, if your audience starts to hear that you're only interviewing people that you want to do business with, or that you expect to try to win a deal, or even, let's just say, on the podcast itself, you are trying to sell or trying to, cram some things in there that just doesn't feel natural, very quickly, first, you're going to turn off your guest. And second of all, you're going to turn off your listeners, and then you're going to lose credibility. And then people are going to say, oh, I don't want to go on that show because I'm going to be sold to. Can you generate business? Can you create pipeline through a podcast? Absolutely. I think there are many people out there that would tell you yes. And one of them is someone that we follow and we admire quite a bit. His name is James Carberry, and he started Sweet Fish Media. Yep. And in full transparency, we are not working with him, and he's not remunerating us. We just know that he's one of the first to kind of do it and to kind of stake his claim to that. And he focuses solely on B2B companies and B2B podcasts. So I absolutely think, Jeff, that it can be done. It should be done. But it should only be done if your intentions are genuine, if you're looking for an authentic conversations and really bringing on guests that can add value. I mean, authenticity, value, of course, those are words that are, maybe slightly overused, but their meaning and what they stand for are timeless. And I think that's important when you think about podcast, is you want your content to be timeless, you want it to feel authentic, and you want it to provide value.
Yeah, I mean, the podcasting space is very nascent right now still. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next, say, year to 2 years with what Spotify's doing, and now, the battle with Apple, and how, because at some point, like, just like anything else, the quality has to increase higher and higher and higher in terms of for people to actually keep listening and watching and et cetera. And then you've got the whole saturation bit, right? Where at some point, like right now, we can send out an invite to 100 people and be like, hey, would you like to come on our show? Where at this point, our new show is a no-name show. Nobody knows who we are, what we're doing, but 99 out of those 100 are probably going to go, yeah, sure, why not? I would guess in a year or two, that's no longer going to be the case. And people are going to have to level up in terms of if you're going to keep going the podcasting route, how do you actually get quality guests? What is your show all about? Does it have to be more produced? Does it have to, I don't know that I have an answer to that just yet, but I think it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing, leaping in and just experimenting and playing the long game by the sounds of it to me, I totally agree with that. And for me, the reason I do the podcast is because I get to hear some of the brightest minds on business and marketing around the world. And if that's the worst thing that happens, well, guess what? I've had a lot of fun. And on top
Absolutely.
of that, and on top of
That's
that,
exactly what we did with our first one.
yep.
Yeah.
And on top of that, then is also the incredible networking, and to shine a light on other people. And for me, it's not about sharing, my ideas. I might throw a couple in along the way, but it's the Oprah effect. It's shining a light on others, and I think that's really important. But it's building those relationships for me, that is just mind blowing. And I'm only a year in. I've done about 60 plus interviews now. The other thing that we're doing a lot of experimentation. There's a lot more to do, and I think we've learnt from Sweetfish Media was one of the inspirations I got 18 months ago. I was introduced by a good friend of mine, Aaron Aegis, who told me about them. We don't use Sweetfish Media. We decided to produce it ourselves. We wanted to own the IP of the process.
Right.
We learn by doing. You see, that's the whole thing. And I've had to build a whole process behind here where I front the show, I have the chat, and then the team looks after the rest, which is fabulous. But and you've got to leverage yourself, and the way you leverage yourself is pay other people to do the other stuff. That's how you leverage time. That's how you create more time, by actually leveraging yourself, by hiring people to do stuff for you. So you can buy time.
You can.
Yeah, and but the other thing that we're learning, and was part of the process of evolution of the podcast, is the importance of the YouTube channel, which we created about 2 or 3 months in. And that's why I asked people to wear clothes now, because we actually video it, which is really good.
Yes.
So, but the YouTube channel's the whole discoverability with the algorithms, not only on audio downloads, but YouTube's really important. So, and there's a lot of noise out there, and it's going to get harder.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So the barrier to entry to content creation is dropping lower and lower and lower for all these channels, right? I mean, a couple of years ago, it was hard to start a podcast. Now you got everything that's free, right? You got you can host it for free, you can record it for free, you can get a $50 mic, and off you go.
Yep.
And, pay, maybe get Zoom for $14 a month and record stuff.
And Zoom is just there's a whole bunch of other tools before, but Zoom's just made it so much easier, and it's amazing, frankly. And allows us to record everyone's voices separately, which then allows editing to be done better. You can record it, in video. It automatically uploads it. You can upload it to the cloud. You can download it to your computer. List goes on. So it's really fabulous. So I'm aware of your time, and you've got a 6-year-old child who's you are grateful that you've got her with you today, which from your story of raising that.
Yes. And I'm surprised she hasn't interrupted us. So this is a rare day.
That's because grandma's down there.
Grandma's down there with her. So we are lucky.
She's the gatekeeper.
Yes.
So what's the future for Proofpoint? And maybe just an idea or two from both of you. And then the next part of before we wind up is how can people contact you?
Yeah.
We are hiring.
We are hiring. So that's a big part of the future.
If there's any budding content marketers listening, we have a content marketer position open.
We have a content marketing position. We will be hiring for a paid media and also a project manager within the next quarter. So that's
pretty soon after that, a director of demand gen.
So we have some. So that's certainly a big part of the future. Mike, do you want to take this question first? What do you believe the future is for Proofpoint?
I mean, growth, really. And again, I think we've been in business for a while, but we're really over the last year have figured out our niche and documented processes and worked out some what we'll call proprietary frameworks for things. So now it's just a matter of implementing and moving forward and executing some great stuff for our clients.
Yeah. I think for me, I would echo certainly what Mike has said, but I would also say that our culture the way that we work, the way that we, we say that we are a family first company. We don't say that we are like a family. Actually, we are nothing like a family. We don't want to be your family, but we want to be a family first company. What that means is that if anyone on our team has any kind of family need, an emergency, kid is home, husband's sick, mom is in the hospital, whatever that might be, God forbid, hopefully it's nothing, but whatever that might be, that your job is safe, that you have a team that would support you, and that you can take your time to take care of your family. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we people work and they need that job, and that's a security for them, but they're working for other needs. They're working for other passions. They're working because they have other people that rely on them. And so in the time, and this is really inspired by our story kind of coming full circle, in the times that we needed to have our security and to have a company that would support our family needs, we didn't have that. And so for us, that's very important to have that culture, to build a vision, to build a model for not just how marketing agencies can work, not just how remote companies can work, but maybe it's a little Pollyanna of us, but we believe that we can set a standard on how companies should be working in the future, for all companies, for all organizations. And so that's my ultimate vision. That's our vision for Proofpoint. That's what kind of keeps us going in the face of some of those challenges, keeps us going in the face of those entrepreneurial missteps that I'm sure every entrepreneur has, from the novice and the new like us to the more experienced and seasoned like yourself and like others that have probably come before us on the show. But I think having that vision, having that North Star, as we call it, is that we want to share what we're doing at Proofpoint internally for our team and the culture, and how others can follow in that footsteps and create a different dynamic for their team.
I think the future of work is evolving, and we've realised that life is work and work is life and meaning. And my mission and vision for JeffBullis.com's been how to win at business and life in a digital world. It's not just about making money. How much money do you need? Hats off to you guys. I think it's a great vision to take the company forward, to make sure it's family friendly, and you look after people along that journey, and everyone wins. And it's sometimes a tough challenge to make that all come together, but you've got the vision, and I certainly like your culture book. I love that. I think that's fantastic. I might steal that from you.
Well, we have it up on our blog, one of our earlier iterations, so you
That's
can
fabulous.
take a look at it, www.proofpoint.marketing, and you go to our blog. You can see it there. Anyone listening can share that, can find that there as well.
Thank you very much, guys, for a fabulous chat from one side of the world to the other. And how do they find you guys?
We are very active on LinkedIn. That's our channel of choice, social channel of choice. So you can definitely find us there. Otherwise, Gaby just said the website's proofpoint.marketing.
And I will also throw in a quick little plug. We just recently launched our B2B marketing podcast. It's called Show Me the Proof, Get to the Point. And so if there are any listeners out there that are interested in B2B marketing, take a look at that. We're also looking for B2B marketing guests, so you can reach out to us on our website as well.
Cool. Thank you, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure, and have a great evening. And I look forward to catching up someday in real life when the international borders are opened and we can go back to being as fully human as possible. Thank you very much.
That would be delightful. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Gaby. Okay, have a great night.